Welcome to Song of Solomon. I will seek the one whom my soul loves. Lesson 5, part 1. So, for those of you that are following along with this study in real time, we've had a 2-week break in the middle of these lessons, which for me was very good. It was refreshing to kind of be with the material in my own quiet time, but just have a little bit more time to reflect on this chapter. So chapter 5 is kind of a harder chapter, so I was glad to have that extra time. But before we jump into chapter 5 today, I want us just to do a quick review on where we have been so far. So Song of Solomon is a book of poetry, a love song, and our main characters are the man, who represents the king, but also the husband. But to us, he represents Jesus as well. So we keep that in mind as we're reading through the passage. The woman, who is the wife, also represents the church. And then we have or the bride, the individual Christian, and then we have the others that represent the woman's friends, the daughters of Jerusalem, who are her support system as we go through their love life together. So they had been like dating, and we saw how spending time with this man has drawn her into more self-confidence and has healed old wounds. And then with lessons 4, we saw that they make time to be together, to be in each other's presence, and that is refreshing. And then the last lesson was the wedding. All right, so before we get into chapter 5, which is confusing, the end of chapter 4, I believe we talked briefly about that this was wedding night. But I feel like in order to understand going forward, when I was meditating on these verses, I really felt that we needed to take time to think about the things that happen at a wedding before we can move forward appropriately. Because we said this represents a godly marriage, a godly couple, and this song is very poetic, okay, and did not dwell on actual vows or anything that were taken. But I think in order to get our perspective right, we do need to focus on that. So instead of jumping into chapter 5, verse 1, like we usually do, I want us to go back up to chapter 4, starting with verses 16. So we're going to chunk out 4:16 through 5:1 and spend quite a bit of time here actually in this lesson. So verse 16, awake, O north wind, and come, O south wind, blow upon my garden, let its spices flow. Together in the garden of love, let my beloved come to his garden and eat its choicest fruit. I came to my garden, my sister, my bride. I gathered my myrrh with my spice. I ate my honeycomb with my honey. I drank my wine with my milk. Okay, so in these verses, this is wedding night stuff. Okay. And so in order to understand how they can enter into this, we got to remember first that they have taken a covenant. They have entered into covenant relationship with each other. So what is a covenant? So in your notes, I believe I might have wrote this definition, but a covenant is a formal, solemn, and binding agreement. A written agreement or promise, usually under seal between 2 or more parties, especially for the performance of some action. So they have come together. They have promised things to each other and to God and to the government, right? There is a legal paper that they have agreed to. And we've talked about this acronym FAT. They've agreed to be faithful, available, and teachable. Okay. So something I wanted to hit on, because this doesn't just represent earthly marriage, but it represents what's happened in our hearts when we enter into covenant saving relationship with Jesus Christ through faith. But God always built his family through covenant, always. Okay, so in your list, I listed 2 covenants I wanted us to look at. In Genesis 17:7, it says this, and I will establish my covenant between me and you and your offspring after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and to your offspring after you. And so this is God talking to Abram. And what is this covenant? What does he emphasize? That it is everlasting, right? Till death, he is eternal, so it's everlasting. But in our earthly marriages, we promise till death to our till death, right? It's to us to be together until we can't be together, till God takes one of us home. Okay, so that faithful, we're going to be faithful to each other, come what may, for the amount of time we're given. Genesis 17:9, and God said to Abraham, as for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your offspring after you throughout their generations. So in Genesis 17:7, we had God's part of the covenant. But in a covenant, there are 2 responsible parties, right? Both the husband and wife will take vows. We'll talk about vows in a minute. But there's responsibility between both in godly covenants. So we saw that God promises to do the work, but also there is an element of responsibility given to Abraham and his descendants to keep the covenant as well, to be faithful. All right. So they, as a married couple, come into a covenant with each other, but then they also make vows. Okay, so I went ahead and wrote down the definition. To vow is to swear or to bind or consecrate by words. So I wanted to know what the biblical stance on vows is, because it's not ever something I've really studied before, but there are vows in scripture. So my mom got me a really nice Bible dictionary for Christmas. And so it's the Zondervan Biblical Dictionary. And so this is what it said about vows. Okay. A voluntary promise to God to perform some service or do something pleasing to him in return for some hoped benefit, or to abstain from certain things. Old Testament vows were never regarded as a religious duty, but once they were made, they were considered sacred and binding, right? So here we see that a vow is something you want to give to the Lord. He's not requiring it of you, but you have chosen to vow these things to him. It's not out of obligation, but it's something that you have decided to give or give up to be drawn near to him. Added benefit. So the end of, Numbers 6:1-3 says this, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when either a man or a woman makes a special vow, the vow of a Nazirite, to separate himself to the Lord, he shall separate himself from wine and strong drink. So this was a special kind of vow that some of the Israelites took. It was available to both men and women to separate themselves to the Lord. And when we think about marriage vows, what are we doing? We're saying to forsake all others, to separate myself to this person in a special way only. So I asked Andy for the wedding vows that he uses in ceremonies. And this is the vows he used. So then do you so-and-so take so-and-so to be your lawfully wedded wife? Just so you know, he uses the same vows for wives and husbands in his marriage ceremonies. Andy is our pastor. To have and to hold, I underline to hold, from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, do you promise to love her as she needs to be loved? So if it's the man, do you promise to love? If it's the woman, she vows to love him as he needs to be loved. With all that you are, forsaking all others, do you promise to love, honor, and cherish her all the days of your life according to God's holy plan? All right, so I think it's a good reminder, especially to us married folk, what we actually vowed, right? What we actually promised to do. I don't actually remember what vows I actually spoke to Wes. I need to go back and look and see if we use these vows or not. Not that it changes the way I'm going to treat him, but it's a good reminder. Okay. And it's a legal binding thing that we did. These are safeguards for us. These are boundaries. So if from time to time I feel like Wes might be neglecting one of these things, it's all right for me to say, hey, wait a second. You're legally bound to hold me. I need some snuggle time. Right? That expectations and promises are good, but we are human, so we get lax on some of these things. But these are the things we agreed to when we entered into marriage. But also, it's a good thing to remember these are good things to hold dear to us when we're thinking about our relationship to Jesus. Do I hold him close to me? Do I desire to be near to him? To be held by him? To feel his presence? Do I make time for that? So it's both important for us that are married, but also all of us that are in a relationship with the Lord. To have and to hold. Christ is mine forevermore. Do I hold that truth? All right. So then it goes into for better, for worse, for richer and poorer. Come what may. Whatever the circumstances are, these vows of what I've promised to do. Okay. And then we see forsaking all others, right? We're going to be faithful. Oh, also I skipped part. Do you promise to love her as she needs to be loved with all that you are? Do I think about that my spouse might need to be loved differently than what I think they need to be loved? Am I studying that person to figure out how to love them? Gary Chapman has the book, The Love Languages. There's other marriage books that talk about this, that we don't all receive love the same way. Okay, so am I loving my spouse the way I want to love them or the way they need to be loved? And that's the same thing that's true with our kids and our parents and our friends. Do I know them well enough to know what they need? And do I consider love a need? It is. All right, moving on. Then we have 3 big promises: to love, to honor, and to cherish. So I'm going to kind of go through how this is important in earthly marriage, but then go back and talk about, are we doing this with our Savior? Okay, so the definition of love is strong affection for another arising out of kinship or personal ties. We have attraction based on sexual desire, affection and tenderness felt by lovers, affection based on admiration, benevolence, or common interests, or an assurance of affection. So love is kind of a confusing thing, isn't it? Because we use love in all sorts of different ways. Now, C.S. Lewis wrote The Four Loves, which I have not read, but it's on my wish list of things to love. But he goes through that there are 4 types of biblical love that the Bible talks about and uses different words in the Greek and the Hebrew that we don't necessarily have, but are helpful. I'm not going to spend a long time on this, and I apologize because I'm probably saying all of these names wrong, but bear with me. So the first type of biblical love that we see is storge, and that's an empathy bond. So it's STORGE, storge, and it's an empathy bond. Okay. So I feel sympathy with somebody because of something they're going through, that kind of love. Then philia, so that's the same root word that Philadelphia is named after, the city of love, is a friendship bond. So love between friends. Eros, EROS, is romantic love. And agape is unconditional or godlike love. All right, so we are called to all of these different types of love. We can never really fully do agape love because we are human, right? We're sinful. But to attempt to love our spouse with all of these. Like, I think that, Hollywood really emphasizes the eros love in marriage. And yes, that's important, but I don't think it's more important than your philia love, your friendship love to your spouse, or your empathy bond, right? Being sympathetic and grace-filled spouse. Those two probably feed the eros love. And then the agape love, we're called to imitate it the best we can, right? Come what may, for better, for worse, unconditionally. I'm choosing to love you. All right. So that's love. Honor, the definition is held in inviolable esteem. So inviolable is not a word I use often, so I looked it up too. So inviolable means highly desired above all others. And that was very helpful in my understanding of honor, what you're trying to do when you honor. So honor, to hold someone as highly desired above others. A valuable reward for excellence in station, character, and service. This one's hard, right? Because we are married to imperfect people, right? That don't always act honorably. But this is what I vowed to do. To the best of my ability, I want to show you honor. I want to lift you up, not just in my words and my actions, but in my heart and my mind. View you as good. And there's 3 ways in your station. So in your work, in what you do, I want to esteem you. I want to encourage you. I want to honor you in your work. I'll be honest, this is really important for me. And this is something me and Wes kind of struggle with because he's very scientific and different things. And like that he respects what I do and see it valuable. To see that I'm talented at things and honor that is important to me. Okay. Also honoring in your character, like who you are. Wes is honest to a fault, right? But what a good thing to honor. Like, my man speaks truth, even when it's hard. He's a truthful person, and to honor that and reflect on that builds love in my heart towards him. And service, okay? Honoring and service. All right, The last one is cherish. So there is, and I think I've mentioned it before in this class, but there is a book by Carrie Thomas that really studies this cherishing aspect in marriage. So cherish means to go out of your way to notice someone, appreciate someone, honor someone, and hold someone dear. So that cherishing means like, I'm going to let you be in my brain and my thoughts as a priority. I'm going to seek out ways to do those first two, to love you well and to honor you. And it takes effort, takes time, takes work, can be hard, right? To think of somebody else's needs and wants and desires, to notice them above myself. Those things are hard. These three things are hard: love, honor, and cherish. And when we break down in our covenantal relationships, it's probably going to be in one of these areas. We have to guard our hearts against it. So I've talked a lot about how these things are in earthly marriages, but let's turn and think about, like, do I do this with my Lord, with Jesus? Do I really love him? Okay. Do I reflect on who he is? Do I honor him? And I love the fact that it's said, because I think this reinforces how we do Bible study. Do I look at who he is in his station? Right? He's the King of Kings, Lord of Lords. He's my great high priest. He is above all others in station. And do I reflect on that and honor that with my prayers, in my thanksgiving, in my speech with my friends? Do I honor the Lord? Do I honor his character? That he is all good, that he is all merciful. And those things build love. Do I cherish the Lord? Do I look for ways to notice him in my day-to-day? Right? My dad always sang, count your blessings, name them one by one. The old hymn. But it is a good mindset. Am I looking at ways to appreciate and honor Christ in sickness and in health, in richer and for poorer, no matter what? Okay, so the word cherish is used only one time in the New Testament, and it's used very few times in the Old Testament. And the Old Testament is always used as like a warning. So it's used like they were cherishing Baal over God, and it's a reprimand. But in the New Testament, it's only used once, and it's used in the positive. And that is in Ephesians 5:28 through 30. And are we surprised that we're talking about marriage and human relationships and Jesus's relationship to the church, right? The whole thing we've been studying in Song of Solomon's in Ephesians 5:28 through 30. So it says this: in the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself, for no one has ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body. Ephesians 5:28 through 30. So we're to love and cherish each other, just as Christ loves and cherishes us as the church. So with this being said, let's finally get to some scripture that we were actually assigned. So verse 16, we see after the covenants have been made, after the vows have been made, they're going to initiate being together. They're going to have and hold each other. So awake, O north wind, and come south wind, blow upon your garden, let its spices flow. So this is the man. And what is he doing? He's inviting her to be with him, to have and to hold. Okay. But we see this man is a good man. He doesn't rush in and take what's his, right? He waits for her. So we see that in 16b. Let my beloved come to his garden and eat its choicest fruits. There's a mutual decision to come together in this way. And there is mutual desire to come together in this way. And that's what we see in healthy marriages. We don't see guilt or shame in the invitation. We don't see force in the invitation to be together either. So in 5:1, I came to my garden, my sister, my bride. I gathered my myrrh with my spice. I ate my honeycomb with my honey. I drank my wine with my milk. So they came together in this way, and it was good. But I wanted us to go through a few things within this verse that he is saying was good. All right. So when it refers to his garden from now on, that's what that is meaning, that they're coming. He is coming to be with her in this special way. They are drawing near to each other. So I came to my garden. So what is the garden? It's with her. But he refers to her first as his sister. And that kind of weirds us out because of our Western understanding. But what is he emphasizing here? The filial love, the friendship love. She is my friend. And he's honoring that, right? He's acknowledging that you, as my friend, are important and lovely beyond what you can give me as my bride. So first he elevates the friendship and the honor. Then it's his bride, right? So friend and my bride. So when we've been thinking about this, what does it mean to be his bride? His covenanted beloved. His honored, cherished spouse. Okay. So in that, they reap the rewards of the covenant and being together. And there is pleasure there, and there is health there, and there is renewal within that kind of relationship. All right. So then we have the others come in. In verse 1, it says, eat, friends, drink, and be drunk with love. So here we have these good friends once again, and they're like, be together. This is a good thing. And I love this because it's a good reminder as Christians, as godly friends to people who are married, we should encourage godliness in marriage. Go on a date with your husband. Spend time with your husband. Be together in this way. We're supportive of it. It's good. We're encouraging you to do it. Okay. So as godly friends, we encourage this. But also as godly and friends, we encourage each other to be with Jesus in this way. We talk about it. You having a quiet time? Was your quiet time good? Awesome. Are you spending time with Jesus? Are you drawing near to him? All right. So remember these vows, it was not out of obligation, but out of delight, out of will to do this. And that's what we see here. They're coming together because they desire one another. Okay. They want to be together. And to keep that in mind when we come to the scriptures. If we're only coming because I have to, there's a problem. Now we're going to talk about this more in the second half, but there should be a prayer in your heart. It's, Lord, I want to desire, even if I don't, I want to desire to be with you. I want to enjoy our time together. I want it to be pleasurable to me to be in your word. Help me with that. All right. So this is where we're going to end the first half of this lesson, and we'll pick up on verse 2. We covered a whole lot in the second part. Bye, guys.